They handed my future to a 23-year-old kid with a family name, thinking I'd stay quiet, clapping along. But betrayal doesn't break a man like me, it sharpens him. This is how I turned that corporate game into my battlefield, where respect wasn't given, it was taken piece by piece. Congratulations to Tyler, I said, forcing the words through a smile that felt like broken glass. My name's Anthony. I'm 44 years old, and I just watched 5 years of my life get handed to a 23-year-old kid who'd been at Ravens Park Ventures exactly 3 months. Tyler grinned like he'd earned something. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and disappointment. Everyone clapped. I clapped too. My manager, Gerald Patterson, stood at the head of the table with his chest puffed out like a rooster. Tyler's going to do great things as our new regional operations director, he said. The same position I'd been training for since 2019. The same position I'd been promised would be mine when old Henderson retired. I kept my hands folded, kept my face neutral. But something cold settled in my chest, right where hope used to live. Tyler was Gerald's nephew. Everyone knew it. Nobody talked about it. The kid had fresh business degree ink on his diploma, and a confidence that came from never having to earn anything. He'd spent 3 months watching me handle vendor contracts, manage supply chain logistics, and troubleshoot equipment failures across for states. Now he was my boss. Anthony's been invaluable in getting Tyler up to speed, Gerald added. Like that made it better. Like 5 years of perfect performance reviews in 60-hour weeks were just elaborate job training for someone else's future. I nodded, happy to help. I said the meeting ended. People filed out, offering Tyler handshakes and congratulations. I gathered my notepad and pen, moving slower than usual. My mind felt sharp and clear, like when you wake up in the middle of the night and suddenly understand something that's been bothering you for months. Gerald caught my arm as I reached the door. Anthony, stick around a minute. We stood alone in the conference room. He loosened his tie and tried to look sympathetic. I know this might come as a surprise, he said, but Tyler brings fresh perspectives, new energy. Sure, I said. You understand, right? It's nothing personally. Looked at him for a long moment. Gerald was 52, soft around the middle with thinning hair. He combed over to hide the bald spots. He'd inherited his position when his father-in-law retired. The irony wasn't lost on me. I understand perfectly, I said. He relaxed. Good, I knew you'd be professional about this. That's why you're such a valuable team member. Valuable. Not valuable enough for the promotion I'd earned, but valuable enough to train his nephew and smile about. Edie walked back to my desk and sat down. The office buzzed with normal activity. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, people solving problems. I opened my laptop and stared at the screen for a full minute before I started typing. I'd started at Ravens Park Ventures in March of 2019, right after my divorce finalized. Needed a fresh start, and manufacturing logistics felt like something solid I could build on. The company handled industrial equipment distribution across the Southwest. Boring work that paid well and let me sleep at night. Gerald hired me himself, shook my hand, said they needed someone with my experience. I'd spent 12 years at my previous company before budget cuts eliminated my position. At 44, starting over wasn't easy, but Gerald made it sound like an opportunity we're growing fast. He'd said during my interview, lots of room for advancement for the right people. I became the right people. Worked weekends when shipments got delayed, stayed late when customers had emergencies, built relationships with suppliers from Phoenix to Houston. My performance reviews were spotless. Gerald always smiled, always promised bigger things were coming. Your management material, Anthony, he'd say, just need to be patty and patient. I was good at patient. My daughter Sophia visited every other weekend. She was 16 now, old enough to notice when her dad looked tired. Sometimes she'd find me at the kitchen table on Sunday mornings, laptop open, responding to work emails. Dad, it's the weekend, she'd say. Just catching up, I'd tell her. Building something good here. She'd roll her eyes, but she understood. Her mom had remarried a lawyer who worked reasonable hours and coached Little League. I was the dad who worked too much but sent her birthday money on time and never missed a school play first crack. Appeared 6 months ago when Gerald mentioned his nephew might be joining the company. Smart kid, he'd said. Just graduated from University of Texas, business degree. I nodded, thinking nothing of it. Companies hired recent graduates all the time, started them in entry-level positions, let them learn the business from the ground up. But Tyler didn't start at the ground. He started in the office next to Gerald's with the title operations specialist and a salary I could only guess at. Gerald introduced him around like visiting royalty. Tyler's going to observe our processes. Gerald announced. Learn how we do things. Tyler observed by sitting in on my client calls, taking notes while I explained vendor negotiations, asking questions. That showed he didn't understand the basics of what we did, but he was eager. I give him that, and polite. Said yes, sir, and thank you like his mother raised him right. I trained him because that's what you do. You help the new guy, even when the new guy's last name is Patterson and his uncle signs your paychecks. Even when you start to suspect where this is all heading, moment I knew came 3 weeks ago. During a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd stayed late to finish quarterly reports. The office was empty except for the cleaning crew. I was heading to the break room for coffee when I heard voices from Gerald's office. His door was cracked open and the hallway carried sound better than people realized. The board's going to ask questions, Gerald was saying. Tyler's only been here 2 months. Another voice, deeper, older, probably James Mitchell from corporate. You said Anthony was ready for promotion. Anthony's solid, but Tyler's family, and he's got the degree. The board likes to grease with about Anthony's experience. Gerald laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, but it wasn't kind either. Anthony's a good worker, reliable, but he's not executive. Material. He'll keep doing what he's doing, make good money, and everything works out. I stood in that hallway for 30 seconds, listening to them plan my future. Tyler would get Henderson's position. I would train him, support him, and pretend to be grateful for the opportunity. Anthony won't cause problems, Gerald continued. He's got a daughter, alimony payments. He needs this job. He'll fall in line. That's when I walked away quietly so they wouldn't hear my footsteps. He went back to my desk, saved my work, and left the building. Drove home in complete silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Gerald's words. He'll fall in line. Like I was a horse being broken to saddle. Like 5 years of loyalty and hard work had earned me the right to be grateful for scraps. I thought about Sophia. How proud she'd been when I told her about the possible promotion. My dad's gonna be a director. She told her friends. Now I'd have to explain why that wasn't happening. I thought about my ex-wife, how she'd always said I was too passive. You let people walk over you. Anthony, she'd said during one of our last fights, stand up for yourself for once. Maybe she'd been right the next morning. I came to work with a different mindset. I watched Tyler more carefully. Noticed how Gerald included him in executive meetings while keeping me focused on day-to-day operations. Saw how other managers started deferring to Tyler on decisions that should have been mine. 3 weeks later, sitting in that conference room, watching Tyler accept congratulations for a job he hadn't earned, I felt something break inside me. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. Gerald thought I needed this job. Thought I'd fall in line because I had bills to pay and a daughter to support. He was wrong about a lot of things. I opened my laptop and started typing my resignation letter. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. For once in my life, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Their procurement manager is threatening to cancel our contract if we don't resolve some shipping issue by noon. Morrison Industries, our biggest client, they ordered heavy machinery components worth $2 million annually. I've been managing their account personally for 4 years. What's the issue? I asked. Something about delayed titanium brackets from our supplier in Tucson. But I can't figure out which supplier, and their emails are confusing. I looked at Tyler's screen. He had Morrison's email open, but he was also looking at supplier contracts that had nothing to do with titanium brackets. He was drowning, Tyler. I said carefully, "Did Gerald brief you on the Morrison account?" "He said you'd handle the transition. But then he mentioned your situation, and I thought maybe I should figure it out myself. Show initiative. My situation." That's what they were calling it now. I spent the next 3 hours walking Tyler through the Morrison relationship, explained how their just-in-time delivery requirements worked, showed him the backup supplier network I'd built over 4 years, helped him understand why a simple shipping delay could cascade into a contract cancellation. "This is incredibly complex," Tyler said as we finished resolving the crisis. "How do you keep track of all these moving parts?" "Experience," I said. "And good documentation. Could you show me your documentation system?" That's when I realized something. Gerald hadn't just promoted Tyler without preparation. He promoted him without understanding what the job actually required. Tyler wasn't incompetent, but he was completely unprepared for the scope of regional operations. I spent my lunch break making phone calls, reached out to contacts I'd built over the years. Word travels fast in industrial logistics, and people were already hearing about changes at Ravens Park. Some were concerned about continuity. Others were curious about new opportunities. "Anthony," said John and Morrison, the procurement manager, had threatened to cancel that morning. "I heard rumors about management changes. Please tell me you're still handling our account for the next 2 weeks." I said after that, "Tyler Patterson will be your primary contact." Silence on the line. Patterson isn't Gerald Patterson, his nephew, Jesus, Anthony. That kid called me this morning asking questions that made no sense. I thought he was new to the team, not replacing you. He's eager to learn. I don't have time to train Ravens Park's management. We've got production schedules to meet. If your company can't provide competent service, we'll find someone who can." The conversation repeated itself for times with 4 different major clients. By the end of the day, I had a clearer picture of what would happen after I left. Tyler would struggle. Clients would get frustrated. Gerald would panic and try to micromanage operations he didn't understand. The whole regional division would start bleeding clients within 6 months. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Tuesday morning, Gerald called me into his office. He looked tired, stressed. "Anthony, I've been thinking about our conversation Friday. Maybe we were hasty. Maybe there's room for both you and Tyler in management. Meaning, you could be associate director, Tyler second in command. You'd handle the technical side. He'd focus on strategic planning. Associate director. A made-up title that meant doing the same job for the same pay while pretending Tyler was my boss." "That's generous," I said, "but I'll stick with my original decision." Gerald's face hardened. "You're going to regret this, Anthony. I promise you that." Maybe, but I was done living in fear of Gerald's promise. SB Wednesday. I had 3 job interviews scheduled in a plan that went beyond simply leaving Ravens Park. I'd spent 5 years building relationships in the Southwest industrial supply chain. Those relationships were mine, not the company's. My first interview was Thursday morning with Silverlinks Energy, a renewable energy equipment distributor based in Austin. Their regional manager, David Harrison, had been trying to poach me for 2 years. "Anthony," David said as we shook hands in his office, "I heard through the grapevine that you might be available." Word travels fast. It does when good people become available, especially people with your client relationships. David offered me a position as regional operations director, the exact title Gerald had given to Tyler. The salary was 30% higher than what I'd been making at Ravens Park. The benefits were better, and most importantly, they wanted me to bring my client network with me. "We've been trying to break into the heavy machinery component market," David explained. "Your relationships with Morrison Industries, Copperfield Manufacturing, and Border States Equipment would be invaluable." It was ethical, standard industry practice. Clients followed account managers they trusted, especially in a relationship-based business like industrial supply. I hadn't signed a non-compete agreement, and the clients I'd served were free to choose their suppliers. I'd need to give Ravens Park a week's notice, I said. Of course, professional courtesy. Though I suspect they might release you early once they understand the situation. David was right about that. Friday afternoon, Gerald called me into his office again. Tyler sat in the corner looking miserable. Apparently, word of my Thursday interview had reached them. I hear you're interviewing with competitors, Gerald said. I'm exploring opportunities while you're still employed here, while you're training Tyler. That's a conflict of interest. I stayed quiet. It's also corporate espionage, Gerald continued, sharing proprietary information with competitors. I haven't shared any proprietary information. Your client relationships are proprietary. My client relationships are personal. I built them over 5 years of professional service. Gerald's face was red. No, those clients belong to Ravens Park Ventures. You take them with you, and we'll sue you for everything you're worth. Tyler spoke up from the corner. Uncle Gerald, maybe we should shut up, Tyler. Gerald didn't take his eyes off me. Anthony, you walk out that door and try to steal our clients. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. He stood up slowly. Gerald, I've given you 5 years of my life, perfect performance reviews, 60-hour weeks. I trained your nephew to take the job you promised me. I've been nothing but professional through this entire process, and now you're accusing me of theft. I'm finishing my 2 weeks' notice and moving on to a better opportunity. What happens after that depends on how you handle the transition. Gerald leaned back in his chair. We'll see about that. I walked to the door, then turned back. Tyler, if you need help with anything over the next week, just ask. Despite what your uncle thinks, I want you to succeed. Tyler nodded gratefully. Gerald Glaretti spent my last week at Ravens Park documenting everything Tyler would need to know. Not because Gerald deserved it, but because Tyler was 23 years old and had been thrown into a situation beyond his control. On my final day, I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to co-workers, and handed Gerald my security badge. This isn't over, Gerald said. For me, it is, I replied. I walked out of Ravens Park Ventures feeling lighter than I had in years. Payback came 6 months later, but not in the way I'd expected. I was settling into my new role at Silverlink's Energy when David Harrison called me into his office. With a grin on his face, Anthony, you need to see this, he said, sliding a business magazine across his desk. The headline read, Ravens Park Ventures Regional Division Hemorrhages Clients, Family Drama Blamed. The article detailed how Ravens Park had lost for major accounts in 5 months, including Morrison Industries and Copperfield Manufacturing. Revenue in the Southwest region was down 60%. The board had launched an investigation into management practices. Patterson was terminated. Last week, David said, apparently, the board discovered that Tyler Patterson had been hired without proper qualifications. Nepotism investigation, they're calling it. I read further. Tyler had resigned voluntarily after 3 months of struggling with accounts he couldn't manage. He'd returned to graduate school. According to the article, Gerald faced a lawsuit from Morrison Industries for breach of contract after a supply chain failure caused a production delay that cost them $2 million. Here's the interesting part. David continued. 3 of their remaining clients have already reached out to us, specifically asking if you're available to handle their accounts. The article mentioned that several former Ravens Park employees had been recruited by competitors, taking their institutional knowledge with them. No names were listed, but I recognized the pattern. When good people leave a company, others notice. What goes around comes around. David said, Gerald Patterson spent 5 years taking you for granted. Now he's unemployed while you're building our Southwest division. I folded the magazine and handed it back. I feel bad for Tyler, I said. He got thrown into a situation he wasn't ready for. Tyler will be fine. He's young. He'll learn from this. Gerald, on the other hand, David shrugged. Hard to feel sorry for someone who threw away good people to promote familia a year later. I was driving through Tucson on business when I stopped for lunch at a diner near the airport. Tyler Patterson was sitting alone in a corner booth reading a textbook. He looked up when I approached. "Anthony, what are you doing here?" "Business trip. Mind if I sit?" He gestured to the empty seat across from him. Tyler looked older, more serious. The textbook was Industrial Supply Chain Management. "Back in school?" I asked. "MBA program at Arizona State. Supply chain focus." He smiled ruefully. "Figured I should actually learn what I was supposed to be doing." "That's smart. I wanted to thank you," Tyler said, "for how you handled everything. You could have hung me out to dry, but you didn't. You tried to help me succeed. You were in an impossible situation. Uncle Gerald still blames you for everything, says you sabotaged the company." I sipped my coffee. "What do you think?" Tyler closed his textbook. "I think I was 23 years old with a business degree and no real-world experience. I think Uncle Gerald gave me a job I wasn't qualified for because I was family. And I think you spent 5 years earning a promotion that should have been yours." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "I'm sorry about how everything went down," Tyler said. "You deserve better." "We both did," I said. "But sometimes things work out the way they're supposed." Tyler nodded. "I heard you're doing well at Silverlinks." "I am, and you'll do well, too, once you're ready." I paid for both our lunches and shook Tyler's hand before leaving. He was a good kid who'd been used as a pawn in his uncle's game. 6 months later, Gerald Patterson filed for bankruptcy after losing his wrongful termination lawsuit against Ravens Park's board of directors. Tyler graduated with honors and landed an entry-level position at a logistics company in Phoenix, where he spent 2 years learning the business from the ground up. Before earning his first promotion, the nephew had learned what the uncle never understood, that respect and advancement must be earned, not inherited. Sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away and building something better. The first quarter, as Silverlink's energy moved like a storm, I wasn't just managing accounts. I was rebuilding an entire regional network from the ground up. Every day brought new fires to put out, but with each solved problem, I felt more alive. For the first time in years, I wasn't someone's fallback option. I was the architect of my own success. Clients who had once been Ravens Park loyalists now sought my guidance. With every meeting, my reputation grew. In the middle of this professional whirlwind, something unexpected entered my life. Her name was Elena Matthews, a procurement director from Copperfield Manufacturing. I'd worked with her briefly during my Ravens Park days, but now, with both of us free from Gerald's shadow, our paths crossed again at an industry conference in Dallas. Anthony. Elena called out as I navigated the crowd of suits and handshakes. She stood by a booth, her smile warm, but her eyes sharper than I remembered. "It's good to see you," she said. "Copperfield's been looking for competent partners since Ravens Park imploded." "Looks like you landed well," I smiled. "Looks like you did." Said Elena had always been professional, but this was different. Over coffee, our conversation drifted beyond logistics and into shared frustrations, ambitions, and eventually laughter. Be the end of that conference. A business partnership had begun to blur into something more personal. Dinners turned into long walks. Strategic meetings became excuses to spend more time together. There was an ease with Elena I hadn't felt in years, but underneath our growing bond, I sensed a complication. Elena was cautious, guarded, like she carried burdens she wasn't ready to share. Back at Silverlinks, expansion was accelerating. David Harrison's trust in me grew with each successful quarter, but with success came visibility, and with visibility came new adversaries. One of them was Victor Kane, a rival operations director from Westcore Logistics, a company that had once dominated the heavy machinery sector in the Southwest. Victor was ruthless, known for poaching clients and playing dirt. Your first real clash came when Copperfield Manufacturing announced a new procurement bid. Elena's department was handling it, and though our professional rapport was strong, The bid was open and competitive. Victor's team submitted an aggressive proposal that undercut our pricing by nearly 15%. When I brought this to Elena's attention, her expression darkened. Victor plays games, Anthony. He'll lowball you to win the contract, then pile on hidden fees once you're locked in. I nodded. I knew the tactic. I knew Victor's playbook. But logic didn't always win against boardroom budgets. I crafted a counter-proposal, one that focused not on price, but on value, detailed service guarantees, transparent logistics protocols, and a flexible support structure. It was a gamble, one that relied on Copperfield's decision-makers valuing integrity over short-term savings. A week later, Elena called me. We reviewed all proposals, she said, and the board was leaning toward Westcore. But I pushed back. I reminded them what happened when Ravens Park cut corners. I told them about Morrison Industries' lawsuit. You didn't have to do that, I said. Maybe not, but I believe in people who do the right thing even when it's hard. You proved that. Anthony Silverlink secured the contract. It was a win, but more than that, it was a message. Victor Kane didn't take it well. A few days later, I received an anonymous email with internal documents from Westcore, detailing their unethical practices. It was bait. Kane wanted to drag me into a mudslinging match. I deleted the email. My revenge was succeeding in silence, but not everything remained within my control. Late one evening, while finalizing quarterly logistics plans, I received a call from Elena. Her voice was tense. We need to talk. In person. Now, I met her at a quiet bar near the office. She was already there, nursing a glass of wine, her usual composure. Frayed. Anthony, Victor approached me today. He offered me a position at Westcore, promised a hefty salary and stock options if I could bring you down a peg. By undermining Silverlink's upcoming expansion proposals, my jaw tightened. And what did you say? I told him to go to hell. But Anthony, this isn't over. Victor plays long games. He'll come after your clients, your reputation. He's already spreading rumors. For a moment, the weight of it all pressed on my chest. The climb had been steep, and now Victor was waiting at the summit, ready to shove me off. But Elena reached across the table, her hand covering mine. You're not in this alone, Anthony. We strategized late into the night. By the end, we had a plan. One that didn't involve counterattacks, but rather fortifying our position. We arranged client workshops, open forums where we showcased Silverlink's operational transparency. Elena's influence helped gather key stakeholders, allowing us to preemptively address any whispers Victor might circulate. It wasn't flashy, but it was effective. 2 months later, Westcore lost a major contract due to breach of trust. Victor's grip on the industry loosened. In the midst of this, my bond with Elena deepened. What began as shared professional respect had quietly transformed into late-night conversations about life, family, and regrets in the evening. As we walked along the Austin waterfront, Elena paused. There's something I haven't told you, Anthony. My father was a senior partner at Westcore. He was forced out when Victor orchestrated a hostile takeover of the board. Watching you stand against him, I wanted you to win for personal reasons, not just business. Your confession added another layer to our story. The war with Victor was more than corporate rivalry. It was a shared battle for dignity. Our connection, once born from mutual respect, had evolved into a quiet but undeniable love bit. Victor wasn't finished. A confidential leak from within Silverlinks hinted at an upcoming smear campaign designed to implicate me in falsified logistics reports. The evidence would be manufactured. But in the court of public opinion, perception often trumped truth. David, Harrison, Elena, and I convened late one night in the Silverlinks conference room. This is a coordinated attack, David said. We need a decisive response. Elena spoke calmly. We don't fight fire with fire. We expose the arsonist. Tyler Patterson reached out to me, I said. He's been working at Westcore, but he's disillusioned. He's willing to testify about Victor's tactics, even if it risks his career. Plan was set in motion. Tyler's deposition, combined with the comprehensive audit trail I'd maintained, dismantled Victor's fabricated accusations before they gained traction. In a board meeting that followed, Silverlinks emerged not only unscathed, but celebrated for his ethical resilience. Seth's battle had been grueling, the victories quiet but meaningful. Standing beside Elena, watching our hard-earned reputation solidify, I felt a profound sense of peace. We hadn't sought revenge through destruction, but through integrity, and in doing so, we'd built something lasting. Jelena and I sat together on a quiet evening, reflecting on the journey. "You ever think about Raven's Park?" she asked. "Sometimes, but only to remind myself of how far we've come." She smiled, leaning against me. "The past has a way of testing us, but it's what we build after that defines using." As the city lights flickered beyond the window, I knew this was only the beginning. The next 6 months unfolded like a meticulously crafted chess match. Silverlink's energy, once considered a mid-tier player, was now rising rapidly, but every move forward invited counterplays from competitors desperate to reclaim their turf. Victor Kane had gone silent after the failed smear campaign, but the quiet was deceptive. He was regrouping. David Harrison had always trusted me to lead the Southwest Division, but now he wanted me to present at the upcoming Global Logistics Summit in Chicago. This was more than a conference. It was a stage where industry giants set narratives for the coming years. Elena stood beside me as we prepared the presentation. She'd become not just a confidant, but an equal in every strategic decision. Late nights at the office blurred into early mornings, but neither of us complained. 3 days before the summit, an unexpected message arrived in my inbox. It was from Tyler Patterson. "Anthony, we need to meet. It's urgent." He suggested a discreet coffee shop far from corporate hubs. Tyler looked different when I saw him, more grounded. His eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen the inner rot of an empire collapsing. "Victor's planning something for the summit," Tyler said without preamble. "A public ambush during your presentation. He's coordinated with a couple of disreputable media outlets. They're planning to release fabricated documents about Silverlink's supply chain failures, making it look like you've been falsifying reports to inflate performance metrics." I leaned back, absorbing the information. "And what's in it for Victor? Discrediting you discredits Silverlinks. He wants to position Westcore as the only viable alternative in the Southwest." Tyler slid a flash drive across the table. "Here's everything: internal emails, forged documents, and the chain of custody tracing it all back to Victoria. Putting yourself at risk, Tyler." Tyler shrugged. "I was part of the problem once. Time to be part of the solution." I thanked him and left, my mind already strategizing. Back at Silverlinks, Elena and David listened as I laid out Tyler's intel. "We need to flip this," David said. "Make it not about defending ourselves, but about exposing an industry-wide malpractice." Elena nodded. "Transparency Summit. We go beyond our scheduled presentation. We present an investigative report on corporate sabotage tactics. Use Victor's plot as a case study." Our plan was audacious, risky, but the industry was hungry for integrity. At the summit, the conference hall was filled with executives, journalists, and stakeholders. Victor was there, seated in the second row. His smirk barely concealed. He took the stage, began our presentation as planned, but 10 minutes in, shifted the narrative. "Today isn't just about Silverlinks. It's about an industry under siege by unethical tactics. We've gathered evidence of coordinated sabotage, falsified reporting schemes, and client manipulation." Through shifted, murmurs grew. I displayed Victor's forged documents, then overlaid them with Tyler's authenticated email trails, showing their fabrication process. The screen showcased how these tactics weren't isolated incidents, but part of a broader strategy used by desperate firms trying to maintain dominance through deception. Victor's expression hardened. He stood abruptly, trying to control the damage. "This is slander, Anthony. These are unsubstantiated claims. The moderator intervened, but Elena had anticipated this. She stood up, presenting signed affidavits from multiple clients who had been approached by Victor's associates with misleading narratives about Silverlink's fallout was immediate. Victor's attempts to deflect were drowned by a cascade of questions from the media and industry peers. Within 24 hours, Westcore's board suspended Victor pending a full investigation back in Austin. Silverlink's stock climbed, new partnership proposals flooded in. But for me, the real victory was the quiet one, the one that happened later that week when Elena and I sat on my apartment balcony, watching the sunset after months of ceaseless battle. Sion never sought revenge. She said softly, "You sought respect. Revenge is loud, messy. Respect is quiet, earned over time." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "There's something I haven't told you, Anthony. I've been offered the VP of procurement position at Copperfield. It's a promotion, but it would mean working out of Houston." I felt a pang of something I hadn't anticipated. Then let's make sure Silverlinks opens a regional hub in Houston. Expansion's on the table, isn't it? Elena laughed. "You're relentless, only about the things that matter." We both knew this wasn't the end of our journey, but a new chapter. A partnership built not just on shared battles, but mutual respect and quiet resilience. Weeks later, a formal announcement was made. Victor King was terminated from Westcore. Tyler Patterson was promoted to operations manager at his new firm, finally earning his position through merit. Gerald Patterson, long bankrupt and ostracized, had faded from relevance to Silverlink's energy. Opened a Houston office, Elena took her position as VP, and I led the operational expansion. The industry had shifted, not through scandal or sabotage, but through the steady, unwavering efforts of people who chose integrity over shortcuts. But as the dust settled, I knew the fight was never truly over. The names would change. The challenges would evolve. Yet, with Elena by my side and a team built on trust, I no longer feared the battles ahead. The past had tried to define me, but I had rewritten my future. As months following the summit brought a whirlwind of growth, challenges, and unexpected reckonings. Silverlink's Energy's expansion into Houston wasn't just a strategic move, it was a statement. Elena's leadership as VP of procurement brought a fresh wave of credibility, and I was tasked with scaling operations across the Southwest, ensuring our processes remained lean and resilient. Beneath the surface of our success, whispers of unfinished business echoed. Victor King's ousting had left a power vacuum at Westcore, and while he was legally entangled, his influence hadn't fully dissipated. Anonymous tips about shell companies, ghost suppliers, and back-channel deals began surfacing. Someone was orchestrating a last-ditch attempt to sabotage not just Silverlinks, but the entire network of firms that had distanced themselves from Westcore's corrupt practices. Evening, as Elena and I reviewed quarterly projections, Tyler Patterson called. "Anthony, I think you need to see this in person." He'd uncovered a paper trail leading to a covert acquisition scheme. Victor, through a network of intermediaries, was attempting to buy out smaller logistics firms, using them as leverage to disrupt supply lines. Crucial to Silverlink's operations convened an emergency strategy session. David Harrison, always calm under pressure, devised a countermeasure. We would preempt Victor's moves by forming a coalition, a consortium of independent logistics providers bound by transparent contracts and mutual support clauses. It was risky, but it ensured no single point of failure could cripple our supply. Chain negotiations were intense. Trust, once broken in the industry, wasn't easily restored. But months of relentless outreach, facilitated by Tyler's growing reputation for integrity, began to turn the tide. The consortium, dubbed the Alliance Network, launched with 10 founding members. Within weeks, it expanded to 20 victors. Strategy began to unravel. His acquisition stalled as sellers preferred the security of the Alliance. Media outlets, still reeling from the summit expose, were quick to spotlight this new wave of cooperative business practices. Westcore's board, desperate to salvage their reputation, initiated legal proceedings against Victor for breach of fiduciary duty. At financial misconduct, but Victor wasn't done. One final card remained in his deck. An anonymous whistleblower filed a lawsuit claiming Silverlinks had engaged in anti-competitive practices, accusing us of forming a monopoly through the Alliance network. The allegations were baseless, but the timing was strategic. A public investigation, even unfounded, could stall our moment to Melina, David, and I prepared for the legal storm. Our defense wasn't built on denials, but on transparency. We opened our books, invited third-party audits, and showcased the ethical framework of the Alliance. Public sentiment shifted in our favor as the truth became undeniable. Silverlinks wasn't monopolizing. It was stabilizing an industry teetering on the edge due to corporate greed. Lawsuit was dismissed within 2 months, but the ordeal left scars. We had faced fire and emerged tempered, not tarnished. Victor Kane, now fully exposed and financially decimated, fled into obscurity. His name became synonymous with corporate downfall. A cautionary tale taught in business ethics course stylist journey came full circle when he was appointed Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Alliance Network. He had earned his place, not through lineage, but through perseverance and integrity. Gerald Patterson, once a symbol of nepotism's rot, lived out his days quietly. His influence and reputation irrevocably dismantled Elena, and I stood on the terrace of Silverlinks, New Houston headquarters, the cityscape sprawling beneath us. We had weathered storms that could have sunk lesser ships. Together, we had transformed betrayals into blueprints for resilience. Who ever think about how it all started? Ellen asked, a 23-year-old kid with a business degree and an uncle with too much power, and a man who thought loyalty was enough to earn him a future. I added. We smiled, not out of nostalgia, but out of acknowledgement of the journey. Respect isn't given, Elena said. It's fought for, earned in the trenches, not in boardrooms. And revenge isn't about destruction. It's about building something so unshakable that those who tried to break you become irrelevant. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of defiant amber, I realized the truth of it. The world had tried to define me by its betrayals, but I had redefined myself through every choice to rise. Every refusal to be diminished. The battle for respect was never about them. It was always about men. Story had begun with a promotion stolen in a stale conference room, but it had ended here, on a rooftop where every victory was ours. Every scar a testament to battles fought with integrity, and as long as there were empires built on deception, there would be people like us, ready to dismantle them one truth at a time.